All right, Biology 11. This is the first lecture for our new unit, Internal Systems. Internal Systems is going to focus on three major systems inside of us. It's going to focus on the digestive system, the respiratory system, and the circulatory system. And we're going to be looking at the structures and functions of each and why they're important to us. Why these three systems? Well, in grade 11, what we're going to be looking at is energy. We are energy beings, right? There you are right there, or me. And we need energy to live and be happy. Cellular energy is ATP. ATP is the fuel that allows our bodies to move, to think, to grow, to heal, to do whatever. You name a job in our body, and it's ATP that is the energy that does that work or allows the work to happen. All right? So these three systems, digestive, respiratory, circulatory, all linked to ATP. To make ATP, we need fuels. Well, that's where the digestive system comes into play, right? The digestive system is taking the different foods that we eat, breaking them down, and then using them for various purposes in our body. The second system we look at is the respiratory system. Well, the second ingredient for ATP is oxygen. And oxygen comes in through the lungs, and that's the major player in the respiratory system. So, that's two of the systems, digestive, respiratory. The circulatory system comes into play in that these two things have to be delivered to all of our 100 trillion cells. I've got to get nutrients into my cells. Nutrients come from fuels, the foods. I've got to get oxygen to my cells. So the delivery system of these two things so they can get into the cells to make ATP, that's where blood and the circulatory system come into play. The digestive system dumps various fuels and nutrients into our blood. The respiratory system dumps oxygen into our blood. The oxygen and the nutrients travel around in our blood to all of our cells, and they enter the cells, and some of those things will be used to make ATP. All right? So before we get into the systems, I'd like to talk about nutrition and the quality of the fuels and foods that we put inside of our bodies. All right? And we'll learn today why people say you are what you eat, and it is actually very true. So, the same setup as we're used to. The class lecture notes, the PowerPoints are in the top corner here on the iPad, and then of course a variety of other little diagrams and that'll help out with that stuff that I would normally draw on the board in the classroom. That'll be done on the whiteboard. All right, so why eat food, right? Every cell needs energy to survive, right? We're made of cells, about 100 trillion of them. They all need this energy called ATP. No ATP, no life for the cell. And if enough cells die, you die because you're made of cells. So we need that energy. And that energy comes from the food that we eat. And some foods are better than others, right? That's why we have junk food and healthy food, right? So some foods are better at doing certain jobs than others, all right? And so the quality of the foods that we put into our body will relate to the quality of the functioning and the building and the repair of our body. So we need food for things like energy, growth, repair, reproduction, and the nutrients found in food give us the energy and the building materials for the body, right? Think of the body as a large building. Well, all of the bricks and boards and nails and screws and pipes and all the rest of that, that's your food. All the building blocks that will make more of you and allow you to run properly are in your food. Now, a nutrient right here is any substance that goes into your body that has a useful or beneficial function. So it's a good molecule, right? A nutrient does something good for you. It serves a purpose, all right? And we'll go into some of these purposes a little bit later. Now, one thing I want to address really quickly, energy. We look at, it's a major thing right now. I think it's is it $1 trillion industry in North America? It might be $1 trillion industry. Diet and nutrition, right? Nutrition is the part of science that looks at nutrient contents of food. A nutritionist studies nutrition and they're experts at what good molecules are in various foods. And based on the needs or the health of your body, they design an eating plan to get those good molecules that you need or are lacking into your body, right? Trillions and trillions of dollars every year spent on diet and nutrition and this sort of stuff. And one of the major things we look at in food are calories, right? So what's a calorie? Well, a calorie is a way of measuring energy. Now, if you're taking Mr. O'Meara's physics class, you're learning that energy is in joules. And you're thinking, wait a second, if that's in joules, what's a calorie, right? And we know that 1 joule is not a whole lot of energy. You know, when you first start doing physics and you exert 1 joule of force on something, you realize that's not a whole lot, right? Even a kilojoule is not a whole lot of energy, right? A kilojoule is simply 1,000 joules, just like a kilometer is 1,000 meters. Food, though, its energy content is measured in calories right here. And what a calorie is, it's actually a scientific term. And it's a unit that is often used to express energy, but it addresses heat energy. Now, most of the energy in our body is transferred as heat, right? There's a little bit of electrical, but other types of energy aren't there. But a lot of heat energy, so we use calories. And what a calorie is, it's enough heat energy to increase 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. So you can get 1 gram of water to increase by 1 degree Celsius. That amount of energy is a calorie. So how do these two link up? Because I'm learning about this in physics, and this is in biology. We're in relation to food. 1 calorie is equal to 4.1855 kilojoules, or 4,185.5 joules, right? And you think a calorie is nothing, right? It's easy to burn off 1 calorie. Well, when you burn off that 1 calorie, you're building 4,000 joules. So this is why we don't use joules, right? You can think a chocolate bar alone will have 200 and some calories, right? Think of how much that would be in terms of kilojoules or joules, right? The numbers would be astronomical. Calories allows us to keep the numbers lower and more understandable. Anyway, moving on. There are 2 types of nutrients, or 2 major categories of nutrients, macronutrients and micronutrients. Now, macro and micro we used in evolution. Macro was big, right? In evolution, this was big scale changes, lots of new species, or lots of them dying out, a big curveball from Mother Nature that would affect a lot of different things. That was macro. Macro means big. Micro is small, right? Microevolution is 1 or 2 species are impacted. No one else even realizes it's going on around you. But 1 or 2 species are undergoing some sort of response or change within that environment. So, macro big, micro small. How that relates to nutrition is macronutrients are needed in big amounts or larger amounts each day. We need a good amount of these things every day. A micronutrient is consumed in smaller quantities. We don't need as much of them in our diet every day. All right? So our macronutrients are things that you're used to talking about when you talk about diet. Carbs, lipids, proteins, right? Lipids are a fancy word for fat, right? And oils. So we have carbs, fats and oils, and proteins. Micronutrients, the things we eat in smaller amounts each day, are vitamins and minerals. All right? So let's take a look at our macronutrients. I'll erase this really quickly. All right. So our macronutrients. These are the ones that we need in big amounts each day. So we've got carbs, right? Carbs is short for carbohydrates. These are sugars and starches, all right? So stuff like sugar. The primary fuel for all living things, or for a lot of the living things, is a sugar called glucose. Plants make glucose. It's C6H12O6. When plants run photosynthesis, they make glucose. This is the primary fuel for our cells, our cellular machinery. So when all these nutrients come in, our mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell that makes ATP, looks for glucose first. So fats are coming in. Mitochondria's like, yeah, maybe we'll see. Protein, no. What? Oh, there's some sugar. There's some glucose. Awesome. The mitochondria will then take that glucose, right? Here's our mitochondria here. You remember from grade 10. It'll take the glucose into it and it will pump out ATP, energy. So it converts the chemical energy of glucose to the cellular energy of ATP, right? And that's the mitochondria. And that's their main job, right? Sugars and starches. Starches are big chains of sugars. You know, hundreds, perhaps even thousands of sugars go into a starch molecule. They're the body's primary source of energy, which means they'll use that first. We can use fats or proteins, but carbs are the number one source of energy. And we find them in things like bread, cereals, pasta, these sorts of things. And of course, sugars and candies, stuff like that. Another type of carb is cellulose. And cellulose is in the plant cell wall. And what it does in us, we can't digest cellulose. So it goes in as roughage and it helps form poop, right? Keeps us regular, as they say. The next macronutrient are lipids. And lipids are fats and oils. All right? So we talk about things like triglycerides and fatty acids, right? If you hear that, we're talking about lipids. Our first unit in grade 12 bio is biochemistry, where we go into detail into carbohydrate structure and function, lipid structure and function, protein and DNA structure and function on a real detailed basis. And you'll get to know what a triglyceride and fatty acid is. We use them in phospholipids, which are a major part of the cell membrane. So that's very important. Cell membrane dictates what can enter or exit our cell. It cushions exposed areas and joints. It acts as an insulator around our neurons in our brain, like the plastic around a wire, an electrical wire. And they're concentrated sources of energy. But, again, if lipids come into our cell and carbs come into our cell, the mitochondria will deal with the carbs first. All right, that S is killing me. I'm going to fix that. The mitochondria goes for these first. All right, so these are a secondary source of energy. Or if we go down to the plaza for lunch and go to Dragon Gem and have a ton of rice, which is a ton of starch, the sweet sauce, the batter on the food, and then wash it down with a Coke and a chocolate bar from the Dollarama, one of the best places on earth, we'll overload our cells with sugars and fuels that we won't burn off. So we'll eat way too many calories of food. And what do? We store it as fats and oils. So it's a secondary source of energy. Our third macromolecule, I will put it down here, is proteins. Proteins are the working molecules of the body. Proteins often use the ATP that your mitochondria produce, and they start to build more of you, break down old broken down parts of you, or heal you, right? Or allow you to grow, which I guess is build more of you. So they're structural purposes in the building and functional in terms of operating your body, your immune response, the breakdown of your food. All of this stuff is run by proteins. They're the working molecules of the body. All right? The word protein itself means of primary importance. So they know they're pretty important. So they are a macromolecule. Proteins are found in things like meat and fish, right? We knew that. Meat, fish, chicken, that sort of stuff. There are some vegetables that have proteins. I think beans have proteins in them, but our meat is the main source. Proteins building blocks are amino acids, right? So think of our wall in our classroom when we said, there's large molecules that are built of the same thing over and over. An individual brick in that wall is an amino acid. The whole wall is the protein. So amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. A lot of your workout drinks have, and it doesn't matter if you're pre or post workout, there's amino acids in those drinks. Things like glycine, alanine, histine, leucine. And what these are the amino acids that build the protein. And guess what muscle is made of primarily? Protein, right? So if you want to get bigger and stronger, have more muscle, You put in the building blocks and your body will then take them and assemble them into more muscle tissue. All right? Anyway, those are 3 macromolecules: carbs, lipids, and proteins. We need good amounts of those every day in a balanced diet to be healthy. Now, what about those micronutrients? I'll erase this. Micronutrients, if you remember, were our vitamins and our minerals. All right? So micronutrients, we had our vitamins in there. And so these are small organic molecules, and they're made of the big 4 elements that a lot of living things are made of: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, CHON, and many act as coenzymes. Enzymes are a type of protein, right? They're a major category of protein. And coenzymes help those enzymes do their job even better. So vitamins, when they act as a coenzyme, what they do is they help proteins, that's short for proteins, work. Proteins are the working molecules of the body. These things help them do the work better, right? They're the helpers. Kind of like the Robin to Batman. There are fat-soluble vitamins and water-soluble vitamins. So if you get a vitamin complex and it says, oh, take this pill, this vitamin, with a glass of water, it's a water-soluble vitamin. It will dissolve within the water and travel around your body to the cells and you'll use it. If it's a fat-soluble vitamin, the pill will often say, take this with food, take it with the meal. Some medications have vitamin complexes in them as well. And the reason for that is, they'll put on the label on the bottle, take this medication with food, because there are vitamin complexes in there that are fat soluble. And the pharmacist and doctor are willing to bet that somewhere in your meal, your breakfast or your lunch or whatever, there's a little bit of a fat component there that these vitamins can then dissolve in and become incorporated into your body. All right? Minerals. We use a different color for minerals. Minerals are also a micronutrient. And minerals quite often come from the ground. When we dig in the ground for stuff, we call it a mine, right? Like a coal mine or a diamond mine, right? A nickel mine. So minerals are things that come from the ground, right? They're inorganic compounds, which means they're not made of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen, right? A couple of important ones here. I have iron. Iron is used in hemoglobin, which is a major component in red blood cells. It allows you to carry the oxygen we talked about before, right? So they can carry this because of this. If we have no iron, we can't carry oxygen, and then we're missing one of those 2 ingredients to make ATP and we die. Calcium. Calcium is used. It's another mineral. It's found in the ground. It's a metal, just like iron. And calcium is found in bones and teeth and gives them strength, right? You know how important your bones and teeth are to you. So minerals are very important. We just don't need them in as great amount. Yeah, just because they're called micro, don't think these aren't important. We just need them in a lesser amount than the macros, all right? We lose these through pee and through sweating, but we can replenish them by eating plants. Plants are a great source of minerals because they're gained from the soil. When the rain falls, minerals dissolve within the water. The plant sucks that water in, and then they're filled with the minerals that are dissolved in the water. So plants are a good source of food. A good, they have a high nutrient content, high nutritional value. Now, our last thing that we want to talk about as far as water. Now, water is a very important nutrient. It does do a job inside of our body, right? Water, the deadly dihydrogen monoxide. So, what does water do for us? We need water. We have to stay hydrated, right? Well, we know that our body is made up of cells. There's a cell there. There's the nucleus there. Now, if we look at that cell up close, the cytoplasm inside of the cell, that's mainly made of water. The extracellular fluid on the outside, the extracellular fluid, mainly made of water. Blood, which brings stuff to the cells. The plasma in blood, mainly made of water. Water is very, very important, right? Sweat, right? It's getting warmer out now. You might be sweating to keep your body from overheating and dying. Sweat, mainly made of water, right? So it's a very important molecule. It's a very small molecule, just 3 atoms involved, but it's very, very important despite its small, really small size. We also have hydrolytic and dehydration synthesis reaction. These 2 reactions are huge, right? In our body, you'll find out in grade 12 a little more detailed. A hydrolytic reaction adds water to break. Remember, lysis was to break. A little bit of etymology 101. Hydro means adding water. So we add water to break. Dehydration synthesis means we remove water or lose water when you're dehydrated. Your body's lost so much water. And to synthesize something means to make. These reactions are opposites of each other. Dehydration makes, hydrolysis or hydrolytic breaks. All right? But water is in both of them. We use this one to build our body. We use this one to break down things so that we can use them in other areas of their body, or maybe they're old and defective and we use this to break them down and recycle things. Water has a high specific heat capacity, which means you got to put a lot of work into it to get warm, right? Think about your swimming pool if you have a swimming pool, right? Or think about the lake. You put a ton of energy into it, right? The first sunny day, that's 20 degrees, right? If you're heating your pool, you're kind of cheating. But think about the pool not being heated. You fill it up full of water, you haven't turned on the heater yet. You get a day where it's 25 degrees. The pool isn't nice and warm just after one day, right? Water's stubborn. It takes a long time to get warm, right? But once it has that heat, right? Think about your pool. It finally does get nice and warm, and then at night it goes down to 15 degrees, but the pool stays really warm because water is stubborn. It takes a long time to put the heat in. It also is a long time to remove the heat. That's why our Lake Ontario, doesn't freeze in the wintertime. It's such a big body of water, and all that water is so stubborn, it doesn't want to give up its heat. And so it doesn't melt. Your pool will melt, a puddle will melt, a small lake will melt. Not that big one. Too much water, high specific heat capacity. What this means for us is, once we get our mainly water-filled bodies up to 37 degrees Celsius, right? It means it's very hard to go above that or below that. And it could be very dangerous to us to go above or below that, right? Water we gain, of course, through drinking fluids. Drinking water is the best thing to do. And water is lost through sweat, peeing, urination, and breathing. You see some people clean their glasses, right? They breathe out on their lenses. There's water that's exhaled every time we do so. So that's it for basic nutrition. Now, each part of this unit, the nutrition, digestive system, respiratory system, and circulatory system, we're all going to have some disorders or health issues related to each one. All right? For nutrition, I have these 2. So these are 2 disorders that are centered around eating and eating patterns. All right? Excuse me. So we have anorexia and bulimia, and this is the proper spelling of bulimia. There is no E, even though it says bulimia. There's no E in there. Both are medical/psychological disorders. Now, medical means it's something to do with medicine. It's the body is affected, and it certainly is. We'll see why in a sec here. Psychological. That is how the brain, psychology is how the brain functions and interprets what's going on around us. So this means that this is a disorder that's associated with our brain and how we perceive certain things, and then that perception alters our behavior, which of course affects our bodily function and overall health. So anorexia and bulimia are more common in adolescent females than males. So teenage girls tend to be the main group that deal with these 2 issues. right? It can affect males or females of any age, but teenage girls are the ones that we find most often with this. So what's the difference? Well, with anorexia nervosa, that's the full name of it. We often just call it anorexia. They don't eat much ever, right? You cut down your food intake drastically. And why would you do that? Because you perceive yourself as not proper, as being fat when you're in perfectly fine shape. But their brain looks at their image, and their body image inside of their brain, even though they're perfectly fit, their body image in their brain says, you're overweight. You've got to cut some weight. And so what do? Well, if food puts on weight, I'm going to stop putting food in. A bulimic has some similarities. These two are both related. They center around food, right? A preoccupation by food and a distorted body image, and both affect girls more than guys. But with bulimia, a bulimic will binge. So they'll have a short period of time where they just eat a whole bunch of food very, very rapidly. And then what they'll do is usually one of two things. They feel sudden guilt, like, oh my God, what did I do? I just ruined everything. I just ate all that food. It's going to add weight to me. I can't have that. I'm already overweight as it is. I got to get rid of it. There's two ways to do that. One is they purge the food. They vomit it, right? So they make themselves throw up. Or they go through ridiculous exercise routines where they can really do damage to themselves by working their bodies too hard immediately after eating. So they'll eat, and then they'll just go through some exercise regimen that is just too stressful on the body, thinking they'll burn up those calories they just consumed. All right? The causes are thought to be a combination of genetics. They haven't isolated any genes yet, but they found that sometimes it runs in families. Social factors, that's a big one. Social factors, there's a lot more pressure on females to look a certain way than males. If you go to any grocery store, and I see it all the time when I'm at the grocery store, they got the magazines by the cash registers there, and you'll see on the front of the women's magazines and half of the guy ones, you've got these women and they're, wearing bikinis and they look like they're fitness models and stuff like that, right? Whereas with the guys, you find on the front of the guy magazines a picture of an athlete. Now the athlete's still in very good shape, but he's not scantily clad, right? He's wearing his regular clothes. Or it could be a car on the front of the guy's magazine. Or a guitar. I'm kind of going with traditional stereotypes. But you'll notice that, right? If you go through, especially if you go to something like Chapters and go to the magazine area, you'll see that a lot more. There's a ton of that stuff. A lot of pressure on young ladies, unneeded and unwarranted pressure on young ladies to look a certain way. And at your environment as well, right? Family pressure, sadly, sometimes families put pressure on people to look a certain way, as well as your cohort. The people that you hang out with can be good or bad for you. So what happens, and I've had a couple of students, I think I've had 3 cases of this in my class. All 3 were teenage girls. And what happened was, in each case, the young ladies had to be removed from class for, I think it was 2 weeks, where they went to a special treatment center. And they learned about nutrition. And they spoke to psychologists. And they kind of figured things out. I know I say reprogrammed here, but that was the only word I could think of at the time. But they get to kind of realign their thinking of what's more realistic. And then steps are taken to, get them back, on a more healthy nutritional pathway. All right. So we look here, the effects of anorexia. So on this slide now, I know it's very small on here. You can enlarge it at home. But with anorexia, things like your hair gets thin and brittle because, well, you're not eating protein. You're not eating any food, right? Blood. Your blood levels, right? Functional blood cells can go down because you're not eating enough iron in your diet. And we know iron is needed for red blood cells to carry oxygen. So your energy levels go down. Kidney stones start to form, right? Muscle, right? Your muscle density starts to lower, right? Your body will eat through all the carbs. It'll eat the fat, but then it will start to break down your muscle as well because it's starving for the calories. And it will use your protein in your muscle as a fuel source. So you can go through here and read these. This is for anorexia. This is for someone that is not eating very much at all. You know, somebody with bulimia, when you go through this, you'll notice that the two, anorexia and bulimia, both will have some similar side effects or symptoms. And of course, those are the ones related to not taking in a lot of food. Now, the bulimic also has some that are associated with the vomiting and the purging. So teeth, the cavities in the teeth, because your stomach acid is now coming up through your throat and bathing your teeth in that vomit as it's exiting your body. So cavities and the wearing away of enamel in the teeth. We see that in bulimics, not so much in anorexics. And also the esophagus, your food tube, because the food that you've just eaten and are trying to get rid of is coming up through your esophagus. We find that the esophagus starts to wear away and burns because of that stomach acid as well. So when you look at these two slides, the one on anorexia and this one, look for those things that are similar. Try to reason, okay, yeah, well, this is because these are similar, and anorexia and bulimia are similar in this way. But look at some of the differences as well. And it will go back to the binging of the food that the bulimic will do that the anorexic won't, right? And to remember the two, bulimia starts with a B, so does binging, right? So that'll help you remember. And everyone has those friends. I have a couple of friends, they go for a run or they go to a restaurant and they're taking pictures of their food and putting it on Instagram or Facebook. It's just like, oh God, really? Anyway, I give permission for any of you to punch me in my face if I'm ever taking a picture of my food and putting it out there on social media. I've got better things to do. Robert Downey Jr., well said, sir. Anyway, that's it. I hope everything was nice and clear. If you have any questions, fire one off in the comments section below this YouTube video or reach out to me through EdsV, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks.